You very much. And of course, the president's trip to Kenya gets overshadowed by this deadly shooting. And once again, we talk about gun control. Kevin, I mean, what are your thoughts on this? How do you prevent something like this?
Well, the debate always goes to gun control right away, but we always see eventually it's a mental health issue, and it's access to mental health care. And as much as we've talked about this in this country, that there's not a stigmatism with getting help for mental issues, it seems as if there is. And you can usually trace these things back, and somebody around these people probably saw something, and access to that. As much as we're talking about access to health care has been an agenda that we haven't stopped talking about for 6 years, this part of health care is critical for the country.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and not only a stigma, but also the resources available as well. Often a shortage, especially in smaller communities where you may not have all of the medical or mental health resources that you need. But it's a huge challenge. But it's a balance that has to be struck between mental health issues, looking at the gun control issue, and figuring out where the most productive conversation actually is. And on Capitol Hill right now, it's very difficult to get to that point.
And I think ultimately makes it so frustrating is that it is inexplainable. We look for answers. We try to understand what would motivate someone to do something like this, and we come up short. And maybe perhaps the answer is simply in a free nation of 300 million people, things like this unfortunately happen from time to time. To your point, they seem to be happening more often than not. But I think that, again, from a market perspective, an analyst perspective, you want to try to find out why is this happening. You have to shrug your shoulders and say, we don't know.
Well, you go back to what Kevin said, and it's mental health.
Well, also to Jonathan's point, let's look at data. And if you look at shootings, is that we get these isolated shootings, which are a tragedy, but then you can develop murder maps of urban cities all over the United States, Chicago, places in Boston, places in New York, where you have the same patterns of shootings every year in the same neighborhoods, depending on temperature. You can figure out when it's going to happen. It happened in Chicago again this year, July 4th weekend, and we don't get the same reaction to those events as we do to an isolated event.
It's fair. The national attention, the spotlight is not put on those, and it can be argued that gun control, mental health have everything to do with the tragedies that happen in Chicago, in New York City, and LA, as they do in a place like Louisiana or Aurora, Colorado.
Yeah.
The solution can potentially come from a very similar place.
And probably Chicago, its economic opportunity is a big part of it as well.
That's a big part of it as well, for sure, and other places as well. Stay